Okay, are we getting into the juicy years? Are the best stories yet to be told?
Well, we are getting a little bit juicy in that this year is the year when I started sneaking into bars underage to perform comedy. So it was at this point, I think, that dad and mom thought, oh boy, this we got to get this horse back in the stable a bit. And at that age, I was in the ninth grade, which was the top year of junior high for me. So I felt like I knew who I was, kind of the oldest kid in grade nine, wise and
We've
wizened.
got it all.
Yeah, we've done it all. Life is passe. I'm done with the school stuff. So yeah, we get into a bit more adventure, getting outside of the school grounds as we would, or past that yellow guardrail into the real world a bit more.
Did you take notes when you were growing up? Did you have a journal or a diary or something?
A little bit, but not really. No, there's lots of, but the one thing is, like, for me, I've told a lot of these stories a lot, and always talked about these things and would tell these stories. So and for me, it was like at that all those years were kind of crystal clear to me because they're so, for me, it was so odd because we grew up on the outskirts of this town, and then we going into the school on this long bus ride. It was, I always feel like my house was the bridge of the Starship Enterprise, and the school was kind of like the planet I'd beam down to, and fight the aliens and come back. So I was like, what the hell was that? It's like, wait, that's the way people deal within a society, Mark. But there aren't any other kids around, so a lot of that was kind of burned into the old head.
What will trigger a memory from that time? I mean, do you have to look at pictures? What do you do to kind of conjure the moment? Because
Well,
there are scenes that are so specific. I mean, I can relate to them and I go, "Oh my God, I remember those things."
oh,
And it,
great, great. Yeah. Well, what I find is, I guess the first season would be a lot of like greatest hits memories, for you. Like, these are really important. I remember this from that time. And then the more you write and the more memory I find personally, anyway, having written a book about growing up and now the show, is the more doors you open, the more doors are inside that room that open up on their own. You'll be like, oh, I remember that nun and she did this thing and she came in the classroom and, oh, right, right. Oh, geez. Oh, you know what else? And then these other things will kind of open up, and it makes you reflect on things a bit more. Like, say this season, my brother starts on the radio and he takes a radio name because he has the same name as my father, who also works in,
Campbell.
yeah, and that he's on the air still with that name, and that created a lot of tension in the house. But in the getting to that year and remembering that, I'm like, oh yeah, that was, I remember dad was upset. Oh God, oh, you don't think about these things until you think about it. And then there's always like there's a little epiphany or a memory or something that'll happen. And plus talking a lot with my brother about these years as well. Now that we're doing this, and all these things kind of bubble up. And so that's kind of exciting.
When you have another writer working on the series, how do you get them on the same track as you? Because
Well,
you go, but yeah, that can't be.
Well,
How
generally, what'll happen is when the writers' room comes, I'll have like all 13 episodes mapped out. Okay, this is what I want to do. This is the story. This is the arc. This is that, and this and that. And then we'll talk about it. And then they'll come back with a draft. And then I'll probably rewrite a lot of the dialogue and reshape it at the end. And because it's so personal that it's very much, plus like the language from where I am too. It's this kind of like this. It's a very specific kind of a thing. If you have to be there, it's very tough to write from the outside, and it's dated and stuff, but it's all conversational, and it's all kind of hand in hand as all the episodes are written.
did
Um,
your family think this is not going to work? This is a stupid idea to turn your life story into a book and a series? I mean, were they
well, initially the book. By the time the book came out, both my parents had passed. My mom passed just before it came out, and my brother is with us, and he's kind of like, why are you doing this? Why do you have to go talking about this? And he's a character, so it's like, oh, for the love of God, that's the last thing anybody wants, the younger brother talking about their life, on television. But I think there's something like, well, the thing, I started telling some of these stories, and Alan Doyle, who was a musician here, was with a band called Great Big Sea, quite popular up in Canada. And I remember telling him a couple of these stories about growing up years ago, and he turned to me and said, "What?" But the part of the story I was getting to was not interesting. He said, "You grew up where? How? Where did you grow up? There? With who? How old were you?" And this kind of thing. And I was like, I remember in that moment going, "Oh God, I'm weird," because you don't realize until somebody's like, you say something and you think it's like totally normal. And I say that a lot coming from a place called Newfoundland, where we'll have odd turns of phrase, and then I'll realize while I'm talking that not everybody uses those words, and I'll go, "Oh my God, that's not a real word. That's something we say." But like that with the memory, I remember saying to him something and going, "Oh my God, that's a weird memory." So I think that, but the heart and soul of everything is, we've all felt like outsiders. We've all been afraid to tell someone we love them. We've all been bullied. So it's a mixture, I think, of specificity and oddness, but also this thing that we all share, was just this kind of feeling like an outsider.
Do you look at something like the Wonder Years as an inspiration for you, or the Goldbergs, for example, which also does something like this, or not?
No, for me, the big one was A Christmas Story. I remember seeing that as a kid. And for me, that was like, oh, wow. I remember feeling like that kid Ralphie, and the family was reminding me a lot of my family. And even though that was set in the 50s, I thought, oh, I totally get this. And then The Wonder Years was on when I was a kid, and that was set in the 60s. And I was in the 80s, but I watched that show, and I was thinking like those guys. Like I remember that the feelings that they were talking about issues that related to my life. And now I'll have parents tell me, and kids tell me, that they watch the show when it airs on television. Like not they don't wait to stream it. They'll watch it as a family. The parents will watch kind of for nostalgia, and the kids will watch because they're 12, 13, 14, 15, and they're afraid to tell someone they like them, or they're getting bullied, or things like that. So each generation will watch thinking it's their show, which I kind of love about that. And then they'll talk about it afterwards. So families will say to me, "It's really nice that we watch this together as a family. It's the only show we watch together. And it's the only show we talk about after, because we shared." They say, I'll tell them, "Oh, something like that happened to me when I was a kid." And they'll say, "Oh, this happened to me, something like that at school." And so they have conversations. And I think that's a great gift if you can, spur a conversation in the house these days. I love that.
I grew up in North Dakota, which was so close to Canada that we
Yeah.
all of the Canadian TV shows. It
Yeah.
was constantly like that. But the thing I remember most about Canadian TV was that it was like not rated. And so you would have nudity on television at
That's the
night.
French, I tell you. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
was that ever an influence for you? I mean, did you ever go, "Oh my God, we got to watch TV after 10 o'clock because we're going to see stuff"?
Oh yeah, 100%. There was a channel called Showcase, and they had and there was the French channel. So it was all French, 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 and then all of a sudden it was the boudoir, at not 10:30, and it's like, what the heck? And because like other channels, like there would be those cable channels too, like the movie channels, that you would hold the knob in between, and you would get the staticky image of you'd see like maybe some nudity go by, but it may be in your, what is it? But or you could turn over to channel, you know what? It was channel 12. I still remember the channel, the French channel. And you would turn it on, and there'd be like just people, just smoking cigarettes and making love all day. And I was like, what's the show? There's not even a plot. And it'd be like a little plot. It'd be like, we have to get on the hovercraft. What? And then you'd go back to making love.
Right.
And then it'd be like, well, what the hell? So yeah, that was great for us, and staying up. But the problem is you'd always have your hand on the knob in case the
Oh,
parents
in
came
case
back.
anybody came in.
And then right away it's, Don Rickles on the Tonight Show, then flick back. So yeah.
Yeah, it was like, we'll watch Headline Hunters. I think that was, or and you say we're watching Headline Hunters. That's all we're watching. And then the parents would come in, and as soon as they left the room, click, and we were over to another channel. But that's the thing that I remember most about Canada. And I thought, will this translate well to an American audience? Have you had responses like that from people who say, "Oh, we don't understand these people at all," or "It's exactly what we needed"?
Well, I think it's what I find, like, I think audiences have changed a lot now. Like, if you had tried to show a show about Newfoundland, Canada in the 80s on a Thursday night in the 80s, it's not set in New York. All television shows had to be set in New York
Right.
except for Newhart. That's it. You have no choice. But now I think people are so used to things like whether it's Fargo, or you might be on Netflix and see some show about Iceland. I think people are probably more willing to um, escape into a different place and not get every other word, or there might be a bit that you don't understand, but that's okay. And I think audiences are a bit forgiving that way. So far, I've only, yeah, I guess I've heard good things from people. Like, people I'll hear from people. Somebody wrote the other day from Connecticut, they love the show and things like that. So they seem to be getting it and understanding it and enjoying it. But I guess those who don't, just you don't hear from them because they stop watching. But yeah, we and Canada and whether it's SCTV or what have you, like for so long, I think we've been popping our heads in here every now and then that there may be some forgiveness for things.
Yeah, it's interesting how this catches on, but how was it when you made those first two seasons without an American audience watching it, really? And now you're up to speed, right?
Yeah.
Because we're seeing them just as soon as you would see them.
Yes.
So how difficult is that? Because you could be in this vacuum before, but now you kind of have to, pay attention to the times. Is that a problem or not?
No, I think like I don't think you can change it because if I wouldn't want to change things too much because we're on in America. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't want to go, oh, I'm not gonna mention the Queen or
Sure.
something. You know what I mean? Because then you're just kind of like censoring yourself um for something that's true or honest, like you might keep an eye on. So there might be something like, oh well, we don't have to get into this. Like, say there's one thing now, like we're grading a test, right? Whether it's a D and 90% of this, like that we'll get network notes like from the CW and Lionsgate or distributors. They'll be like, oh, we don't really understand that. I was like, oh, okay, I can switch that. Little things like that,
Sure.
which is helpful because you don't really know until somebody brings it up. I don't know what you're talking
Sure.
about.
Grade nine is an example of that.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
like grade nine, but there you
Yeah,
go.
100%. Right. So, but I mean, from Canada, like there's lots of things that are different that we watch from America too, but we're not like going like, oh my God, I don't understand what grade,
Stop.
so you kind of roll with it, I think, if you're going to.
One last thing, because I know they want me to go, but what's it like being dad? Is
That's
that
great because the first time I did stand up, Dad was so well known in Newfoundland where I grew up as a radio personality. I did an impression of him, and people, and he came in when I was in a bar underage got upset, and that's actually episode 12 of this show. So standing there playing my dad, yelling at me for doing an impression of my dad, um, as a kid, like the Benjamin's playing me and I'm playing my dad. That was a bit weird. But what a great gift it gives me is memory is such a personal, selfish thing. You remember things the way you want to remember them. And playing my father makes me kind of put on my dad glasses and look at the situation from his point of view. And it's really brought me a lot closer to him and made me realize maybe more the truth of the memory when you start to put yourself in through somebody else's perspective. So it's been a great gift, trying to get in his shoes.
well, thank you so much. I think it's such a fun show, but now start showing the dirty channels. I think that's part of it for the
You
next
know
season.
what? I just made a note here in my little scribbler to
Please
show the
do.
Dirty Channel
All
because
right.
this year there is a naughty magazine that pops up. So from there
Good.
we'll go to the Dirty Channel.
It's X-rated beyond this, that's how.
I
Hey,
love
thank
it.
you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Really enjoyed it.
Great one.
All the best.